Well, lots of pithy Canucks stuff to get into here as we get closer and closer to training camp. Rick Tocchet, the latest Canucks official, and I know you're a veteran of writing on this, PJ, sort of bemoaning the lack of a practice facility. He had hoped the players would centralize here in Vancouver in mid-August. That didn't happen, but he said, I'm not holding it against them because of the lack of a practice facility. That's what we're asking on the Bodog poll question. Is that holding them back at this stage as an organization, Patrick?
I don't know if it's holding them back, but it certainly is a thing that everyone else has, and there's a reason why. It just makes things a little smoother, a little more efficient. And, you know, when you have a team that is having to constantly scramble for practice times, practice locations, I have to believe that, you know, NHL players just want to know where they're going, and they don't want to sort of go week to week wondering if they're still back in minor hockey. Practice rink's been a topic for 13 years. I mean, someone at least joked to me that was part of the recruitment of Chris Tanev. But you go back, I mean, I've written about this, I don't even know how many times now, but you go back and you can find references going all the way to basically 2010. They were talking about trying to get something going in the sort of False Creek Flats plan. There was at one point building it underground. There are still some plots of land near the arena. Like, you know, there was a plan to do something at the Plaza of Nations that fell apart. There's not a lot of spaces left. I know there's someone out there who sent me a picture. He said, hey, I was walking near the old RCMPA headquarters. There's an Acqualine development site there. I'm like, well, yeah, I assume it's an MST project. That's called the Heather Street Lands. It was approved last year. There is a First Nations cultural center, essentially a community center. There's no rink going in there. I think the next one that could be in the range of things is out in Jericho, but that process is way down the road. That's hardly started. Maybe they can convince. I mean, as far as I know, there's nothing going in with the Sanok program project that's going in around the foot of the Broad Street Bridge. I had heard someone suggest there's that empty plot of land next to the Cambie Street Bridge on the south side. That's where they park, the VPD park all their cars, and that's going to be redeveloped as something. I don't know if there's space for a rink there. I don't know if the city would really like to put a rink there. I mean, they do need more ice. It's the city itself. Ice total is, or the total number of sheets in the city is stagnant at best. Despite, you know, I mean, there's been opportunities over the years and they haven't taken them up, and now here, this is where they are.
Does it have to be a partnership, Patrick? Does it get to the point where they just have to buck up and develop it on their own? Because that seems to be what has delayed it to date. Yeah. And what I would be worried about is that now ownership's putting all this money into the arena with the video board and the new seats and everything that's happening over a 3-year period there, that they look around and go, wow, we're already investing in the arena. We don't have the funds available, or choose not to make funds available for a practice facility. Would that be a concern of yours?
Well, I mean, first of all, on the partnership thing, that's how they've done business. You know, they build things with people, and they don't tend to hang on to most of that stuff. They're in the process, and then, you know, they obviously they own. There's the Berry Farm, and they have other agricultural interests, and they own some hotels, and they own some restaurants and things like that. But when it comes to building they build the large buildings and then they get sold generally by Bob Rennie. That's kind of been their way of doing business. So, I mean, maybe they will have to do that, but that has not been their MO. I mean, obviously they own Rogers Arena. That's something they own. You do look and wonder if part of this calculus was they were expecting the viaducts. The viaducts are supposed to come down, but who knows when they will. And you know, the city essentially doesn't, as I understand it, doesn't have the budget to do it. So, you know, they would need a development partnership to happen for someone to remove them. You know, certainly, you know, there's always been noise about the parking lot across the street and what have you, but it's just, in the end, whether it's a partnership or not, there's just not many options left in the city. And the other thing is, you know, you want to make it convenient for your players. And when all your players, save JT Miller, live on the west side or in Yaletown, that kind of limits your options in terms of what you can develop and where you're going to actually be able to go. And it's going to be expensive. Land's expensive. You know, maybe 20 years ago, if they you know, obviously before Aquilini's bought the team, but, you know, 20 years ago, they were at 8 rinks. that was originally picked because 30 years ago, a lot of the players lived in Burnaby and New West, and it was convenient for that group of players, but that's not where players live anymore. So there's a lot of considerations at stake and not a lot of options.
And I think one of the things, too, guys, on the partnership front, at least with the city of Vancouver, is the Canucks generally are done with the practice facility by 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon each day.
Yeah.
And there are still lots of hours in a day that a sheet of ice can be used for public skate, figure skating, minor hockey. And as Patrick said, like, you think about Yaletown has sprouted up, and to meet the needs, the recreational needs of the people that live in all those towers, they are underserved when it comes to a public sheet of ice, which is why Plaza of Nations makes so much sense in so many ways. But at the same time, a practice facility for an NHL team doesn't have to be attached to or right next door to their own rink. When I think of the Kraken in Seattle, their practice facilities at Northgate, I think. Vegas is out in Summerlin. And so really it is
LA's El Segundo, you know.
Finding that sweet spot that's not too far for the players, but it doesn't have to be right downtown or across the street.
Well, and gentlemen, I don't dispute that ideally a partnership with the city that gets more ice available recreationally for the citizens of Vancouver is a great idea. But how much longer are we going to wait on that partnership, and how much will it hold the Canucks back as they go into free agency period after free agency period, and guys go, oh, you don't have a practice facility? Or like this year, we're talking doesn't get the group together for an extra couple of weeks because they don't have the facilities available to them.
I mean, let's not forget as well. I mean, as much as talking one of them would said, hey guys, come on back. I mean, that was, yes, there was an element of that, as I understand it, in Pittsburgh, but that has to be on the players, right? Like Talkett can't mandate that. Those are in the contract.
Fair.
Now, there's a culture aspect. You want to encourage players. And if you have a rink, the players are allowed to use it. And, this was something that we go way back to the fine the team incurred for their postseason skates. And the rule change that's come out of it that if players want to ask to skate with a coach, they are allowed to do so. It has to be approved. But the mere idea that you have a base that they can center themselves at. I mean, I know there are players that like to use Rogers, but the ice isn't there. And as has been noted, there's been a lot of renovations going on. Who knows even if it could be any, that makes sense. They have to update their rink at some point. So, you got to do it in the summer. But the lack of a centralized base, I think more than anything, it's not so much, every team practices anywhere, anytime, you go on the road, you're practicing where facilities get used to it, whatever. But just that idea of the base, that is the standard now. And that is what set the Canucks have set themselves apart. They don't have it. I mean, even Calgary, the new arena plan is supposed to include a practice facility, and assuming that plays out, that will leave just one team in the NHL that doesn't have their own dedicated practice facility, and that is your Vancouver Canucks.
As we chew on quotes from the Q&A at sportsnet.ca, there's been so much focus the last couple of years on penalty killing, and the Canucks have really overhauled their penalty killers when you think of Carson Soucy and Ian Cole and Teddy Bluger and then P.S. Suter. I thought this was interesting. Talkett says these guys are very good penalty killers. They're grittier guys. They're willing to block shots. They don't let pucks through them. They knock pucks down. That's what good penalty killers do. Didn't name names, didn't call anybody out, but essentially is saying the guys that have been doing it for the last couple of years, they didn't do any of that stuff.
Well, to paraphrase someone that once answered a question to you, this is who they had. It was obvious to everyone that one of the problems that this team was facing over the last couple seasons was an inability to stop the cross ice pass. The path, the Royal Roads pass, as we call it across the slot that makes the goalie move in sort of the maximum amount. It's the toughest save for a goalie to make. And the Canucks were pretty terrible at that. Blocking shots, sure. I mean, that's part of the whole nature of defending now is, they talk about layers and having how many guys between the shooter and the net before it even gets to the goalie. That of course is, you do need to find players who are, it's not even blocking, it's just the presence, right? Like they take away the opportunity, as we saw happen for so much of the season with Elias Pettersson. It wasn't even that he wasn't firing it into shin pads, it's that he knew the shot wasn't there. Teams are conscious of not giving away possession that way. So that's one aspect. And that's sort of that, I think it's just that understanding of how to take that space away. And clearly, at least the way they were trying to do it, the personnel and the system didn't match. And we'll see. You know, it's hard to imagine them being terrible that terrible 3 years in a row, but you never know, right?
I guess the other question then is at the other end of the ice on the power play, this suggestion of, you know, by committee, and we wondered when Jason King was shown the door. And I'm glad he landed on his feet in Minnesota, and I'm sure he'll continue to have success. And I think he was well regarded. I was a little surprised, actually, that they moved off him, but Rick Tocchet said the too many bodies around at sort of that coaching level.
But moved off of him without a full-time replacement is quite interesting.
The Sedins are part-timers, and Sergei Gonchar's in and out, and Yogi Sveikovsky is around as the skills coach. But it is going to be fascinating. And this notion that this leadership group that he continues to speak about, you know, it sounds like he's going to empower them to, you know, have a legitimate voice in the way the puck moves, or at least the way they want it to move on the power play.
I would say the Gonchar lesson is really interesting. That, you know, here's a guy whose job, this part-time, is unfair to him because he was part-time here, but he was working the job full-time. And I think a lot about the discussion. I thought a lot about the discussion he and I had earlier in the season, and then honestly, sort of a follow-up conversation I had with Mike Komisarek at development camp, but just the way you can interact because of text messaging and video and all kinds of things, the way these guys can interact with the players. It's so you can be so much more in depth now because of, you know, all the things I think in many ways we've learned because of the pandemic, you know, things like video conferencing and sending clips, and just people are so attuned to that, that the sort of the collective idea that we are going to work this as a group. And, you know, it was funny because I was looking through my photos the other day, just sort of looking back on the year or whatever. And I came across a photo that I took of I think it was actually Tocchet and King and, you know, the likes of Miller and Pettersson, like the power play, PP1, they were working together out at UBC. And I kind of made the joke because they were standing around talking. It looked like the scene from Bull Durham where they couldn't decide what they were going to get for their teammates' wedding and the recommendations and all that. And I've made a joke about that, but there very much is this sense of the give and take. Like, these guys know how to play. They know what a good power play looks like. This power play has had success. Obviously, the Sedins have a lot of experience in that regard. So the idea that maybe they're going to take more of a collective approach didn't surprise me. To say that, well, no, we know, you know, the structure's not that complicated. Everyone's going to do the 1-3-1. And then you've got to figure out what's happening and how do you adjust and what are the little plays you're going to run between players. It'll be interesting to see how it goes, and maybe it won't work. And you really do need the general in charge of the power play. But whether he's there or not, you know, it's going to be the interesting execution question. And yeah, sure. I mean, I can fully believe that Sergei Gonchar's role will evolve. I mean, he signed on to do it one way. It sounded like it worked pretty well. Part of the rationale is because he made a choice that he wanted to be around for his kids more than he was, especially late in his career when he was like playing in Montreal and his family basically lived in Dallas and things like that. And his kids are going into university, and he wants to sort of be there for him and have a bit of it all. And he said it was amazing how much, you know, he could send guys, even if he wasn't there, he'd watch the game at night, he'd make down some notes, he'd clip some stuff because they have this incredible system behind the scenes, and he'd send the guys, and he said you'd get responses from the guys like first thing in the morning. You know, it's that classic thing I think most people do now. They wake up, they look at their phone, what's the weather, you know, whatever else they do. And in that sequence, Canucks players were getting involved with what was being sent to them. And I mean, that was the same thing Mike Komisarek said about the kids he was working with on the development side of things, that there's just players are attuned to sort of feedback and thinking about this kind of thing and being in the center of the discussion in a way that, yeah, maybe it is now time. It shouldn't be a surprise from my standpoint that we are trying something different. Sorry, guys.
It's all right.
I'd ended my point right
there.
No.
It, as timing went, it's perfect because if you want to deal with it,
it's not a problem.
Okay,
it's not a problem. It's very minor.
All right. So Trevor, we'll have an edit here.
Yeah.
Screw that. I'm keeping it in.
Yeah, whatever. I thought Tocchet's answer on third line center was interesting because we all thought that Pius Suter would just slot right in. He's asked, do you have a true third line center after Pettersson and Miller? His answer right now, yeah, it's a committee. Production-wise, we'll see. I'm not comparing us to the Stanley Cup chance, but you look at Vegas with their lineup, they kind of spread it around. They did a nice job, and everybody contributed. Can we be that type of team where we spread it around? And this may just be messaging that, hey, Suter, nothing's going to be gifted to you at training camp. Bluger and Nils Aman are there fighting for it. But what did you make of that comment?
Well, a little bit of the old Travis Greene getting mad at us if we talk about a first line, a second line, a third line, and a fourth line. That's the Beagle line. A little bit of that.
But Travis only had third lines. That was the problem. He had 4 third lines. So,
but the idea of not labeling, this is what these guys do and that's it. I get it. I mean, I thought it was mostly just him being cagey. I mean, it's still pretty obvious what the talents of the various players are. Last year, if you looked at that Oman line, in general, they were sent out to sort of give the other players a rest. There were times, obviously, where they would ride. Hey, Dakota Josh was playing great. We're going to ride that line. There were times where they did that. But as a general rule, this was a team that when in the crucial moments, it was JT Miller or Elias Pettersson that were on the ice. And if they needed a goal, that's what they were going for. Now, there were obviously some examples, like I said, where that wasn't always the case. And I think that's what we're going to see. It's going to be situational. What do you actually need? What can you expect from these players in this moment? Who's likely going to be on the ice against them? And trying to optimize it from that standpoint. So like I said, for me, it was more just trying to be a bit cagey about what your plans are for the season, even if it's kind of obvious for everybody.
Right. I know you caught our interview with Milstein yesterday, and Mikheyev is going to have another consult here with doctors. And as Milstein says, I'm trying to tell him it's not a sprint. So how closely will you be watching Mikheyev and how much he wants to be involved early on, right? I'm sure he's excited to get back. And, of course, how much the Canucks may say, hey, let's make sure we play the long game here and save you for the regular season, not just camp and preseason.
Well, that's it. It's a long stretch this season. Obviously, you want to be fit and ready to go right off the bat. But I always was going to be impressed if he'd be back and fully ready to go. I mean, he's coming back from a substantial injury. Surgery was some time ago. We are sort of at the end of that. And it is, look at all the guys that have come through. We can start your list with OEL last year, go back to Brock Besser, go to Petey, whatever the injury is. If you don't have that full summer of skating and you try to come back right away, it never works out. So, the idea that Mikheyev was going to be 100% back, maybe I should have said this a bit louder at the beginning, but it is to me about, is he fully fit and ready to play? And has he had the full sort of preseason? I mean, obviously the offseason has been disrupted because he won't have had a full offseason. It's going to be about, are you ready to go? Are you ready to play? And obviously you want to have your full lineup at the beginning of the season. Hopefully the Canucks are smarter than that, and they recognize that it's the marathon and not the start that matters.
They've been pretty nonchalant about cap compliance and the fact that they see a path forward here. Is there a world in which they know more than others have let on that Mikheyev may not be ready for the start of the season and could be a candidate to start the year on LTIR?
I mean, that's 10 games, right? Like that takes you into November, which seems long.
Got to have a good start, Peach. Got to be better this October, as we all know.
I mean, I said, the marathon matters more than the start, but obviously the start, Canucks is in the big picture, does matter. And so that is the balance that you come back to when you look at a guy like Mikheyev. I had that ponder. I actually had that thought as well, Jeff, when I saw Dan's comments yesterday, just in terms of exactly that. Like, are there more balls in the air than we realize? And I think that's always possible. I always figured that part of their thinking here is they don't have to make a decision until the end of training camp. And as I think we noted last week, in theory, you could send Pearson down. You could waive him before the season and assign him to Abbotsford to start the season, and then you are cap compliant, and then you work your way back from there. I certainly think that's possible. I'm sure they would rather not do that, but if the point is to win games, and you don't think Tanner Pearson is going to help you win games, well, I guess you're going to have to pay, you pay him $3 million to be in the AHL. I mean, they have done that before. With a guy that made twice as much. But I think we're mostly sitting here waiting for to see how things play out. Somebody's going to get hurt, and I've like I've said, I've been meaning to actually go and look at this, but off the top of my head, there in general there is someone who does not start the season who you might have penciled in as being on the roster before training camp, and that has become a general trend.
There's also the possibility, gentlemen, that they don't submit a 23-man roster, right? Like you can go shorter, and then you're into LTIR.
You have 1 and 1, exactly. You have 1D1. I mean, they go on the road, they're going to have 7D. Like, there's just no way they start that first season. That trip at the beginning of the season was 6D. So they are going to have to make some choices. But yeah, exactly. You can go 1 and 1, and if you have to put some on a plane, put some on a plane. It's not like the schedule that they open the season with is exceptionally difficult to navigate your way around in that term.
Good to see you back from the bush. Thanks for this. We'll catch up next Tuesday.
Take care, guys.
This is the Carson Price clip brought to you by Bodog. Make a play at Canada's choice for free casino games, sports odds, and poker strategies.